The feeling of looking at someone who changed the world is often accompanied by a sense of profound mystery. We look at the icons who define generations, those rare individuals whose names become synonymous with an era, and we wonder what truly made them different. For decades, the global stage was dominated by a figure who seemed to defy the very laws of cultural gravity. Michael Jackson was not just a musician. He was an anomaly, a human being who captured the collective imagination of the planet in a way that had never been seen before and will likely never be seen again. From his earliest days as a child prodigy to his final years as a reclusive titan of industry, his life was scrutinized under a microscope that few could ever survive. Yet, despite the endless headlines, the biographies, and the court documents, the deepest truths about his existence remained locked away where no camera could see them. The human body holds secrets that even the most invasive media cannot uncover, cataloged in a microscopic language that defines our health, our ancestry, our limitations, and our hidden burdens. When scientists finally gained access to the genetic map of this cultural phenomenon, the data did not just answer old questions. It shattered long-standing assumptions and left the scientific community deeply startled. To understand the shockwaves that rippled through the scientific community upon examining this genetic profile, one must first understand the unique psychological and physical paradox that characterized his entire life. For years, the public viewed his physical transformations through a lens of intense skepticism and judgment. Every change in appearance, every shift in skin tone, and every medical eccentricity was treated by the public as a deliberate theatrical choice or a psychological crisis. The narrative surrounding him was one of artificial modification, a story constructed by a media landscape that preferred sensationalism over biological reality. But science does not care about public narratives. Science looks at the raw, unvarnished code that dictates how a body functions, how it reacts to stress, and how it degenerates over time. When the laboratory analysis of his DNA was completed, the results forced an immediate and drastic rewrite of the history the world thought it knew. The genetic markers revealed a body that was fighting an internal war, a biological battleground, where rare conditions and genetic predispositions were clashing with the immense pressure of global fame. It became immediately clear that what the world had spent decades criticizing as eccentric behavior was actually a series of desperate responses to a severe, unpredictable medical reality written directly into his chromosomes. The first major revelation that stunned researchers involved the long-debated transformation of his physical appearance, specifically his skin. For decades, the changing complexion of the global superstar was the subject of intense, often cruel public speculation. Critics and tabloids spun a malicious narrative, claiming that he was deliberately trying to alter his racial identity, rejecting his heritage in pursuit of a different aesthetic. This narrative became deeply embedded in the cultural consciousness, creating a profound misunderstanding that followed him to his grave. However, when geneticists examined the DNA samples, the microscopic evidence told a completely different story, one rooted in absolute biological truth, rather than cultural myth. The genetic profile confirmed the presence of specific variations heavily associated with vitiligo, a rare and poorly understood autoimmune disorder. Vitiligo occurs when the body's immune system mistakenly attacks its own melanocytes, the cells responsible for producing skin pigment. This results in irregular, unpredictable patches of skin losing their color entirely. The DNA data revealed a profound genetic susceptibility to this condition, proving that the transformation of his skin was not a cosmetic choice, but an aggressive, uncontrollable systemic disease. The scientific confirmation of this genetic predisposition completely inverted decades of media narrative, transforming a story of alleged vanity into one of profound medical struggle. For a person whose entire life was predicated on being seen, whose face was one of the most recognizable on Earth, the onset of an autoimmune disease that systematically destroys skin pigment is a psychological and physical nightmare. The genetic analysis showed that his body was locked in a perpetual state of autoimmune chaos, where the immune system was actively destroying its own tissue. To manage this condition, while remaining under the glaring lights of stadiums and television cameras, he had to resort to specific medical treatments, including depigmentation therapies, to even out the remaining patches of skin, which explained the dramatic shift in his appearance. The scientists analyzing the data realized that the public had spent a generation mocking a man for a severe genetic illness. The DNA acted as an unassailable witness, clearing away decades of slander and revealing a human being who was forced to navigate an agonizing, highly visible physical transformation, while the entire world watched and judged without understanding the underlying biological mandate. Beyond the stark reality of the autoimmune skin condition, the genetic analysis uncovered another deeply unsettling truth that explained one of the most tragic aspects of his life: his chronic, debilitating pain and his reliance on heavy medical interventions. Throughout his career, particularly after a catastrophic accident during a commercial shoot in the mid-1980s where he suffered severe scalp burns. His relationship with pain medication became a central fixture of his public profile. The media often portrayed this as a lack of discipline or a standard symptom of rock star excess. Yet, when scientists looked into the specific gene sequences responsible for pain perception, drug metabolism, and neurological processing, they discovered a highly complex and dangerous genetic setup. The DNA revealed specific polymorphisms in the genes that regulate how the brain processes pain signals and how the liver metabolizes analgesic compounds. Individuals with these specific genetic markers experience pain far more intensely than the average person, a phenomenon known as hyperalgesia. Furthermore, their bodies process standard pain medications differently, often requiring significantly higher doses to achieve the same therapeutic effect, while simultaneously accelerating the development of tolerance and physical dependence. This genetic revelation shed a completely new light on the immense suffering that characterized his final decades. He was not simply a man dealing with the lingering physical aftermath of a severe burn. He was biologically wired to experience that pain with heightened intensity, combined with a metabolic system that made managing that pain safely nearly impossible. The scientific team found that his genetic makeup put him at an incredibly high risk for the exact pharmaceutical complications that ultimately claimed his life. His body was a perfect storm of pain, vulnerability, and metabolic resistance, meaning that the medical treatments he sought were not a matter of recreational indulgence, but a desperate, genetically driven quest for relief from an internal sensory onslaught. The realization that his tragic end was heavily influenced by a genetic trap stunned researchers, as it demonstrated how a person's very DNA can create a biological trajectory that is incredibly difficult to escape, especially when placed under the unprecedented stress of being the most famous entertainer alive. As the geneticists dug deeper into the chromosomal architecture, they encountered yet another surprising discovery. This one related to his respiratory system and overall physical endurance. Throughout his life, despite his astonishing performances and unmatched athletic ability on stage, there were frequent, quiet whispers about his fragile health, sudden collapses, and bouts of severe breathing difficulties. The genetic data provided an unexpected answer to these mysteries, revealing that he carried a rare genetic mutation linked to alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. This is a genetic disorder that results from a lack of a specific protein produced by the liver, which is crucial for protecting the lungs from inflammation and damage caused by illnesses and environmental factors. Without sufficient levels of this protein, the lung tissue becomes incredibly vulnerable to degradation, leading to chronic shortness of breath, frequent respiratory infections, and a condition similar to emphysema, even in individuals who have never smoked. The discovery of this respiratory vulnerability added another layer of astonishment for the scientists examining the data. It meant that during the peak of his career, while he was performing grueling, high-energy 3-hour concerts that required peak athletic conditioning, his lungs were operating under a severe genetic disadvantage. Every dance routine, every prolonged vocal performance, and every intense world tour was being executed by a body that was structurally prone to respiratory failure and chronic fatigue. The sheer willpower required to override such a significant genetic limitation is difficult to quantify. Instead of a man who was fragile and weak, the DNA revealed an individual of extraordinary resilience, someone who consistently forced his body to perform at superhuman levels, despite possessing a genetic blueprint that should have restricted him to a much more sedentary existence. The contrast between his actual biological limitations and his legendary stage presence forced scientists to view his career not just as an artistic achievement, but as a monumental triumph of human will over genetic adversity. The genetic analysis also provided a fascinating and deeply moving look into his ancestral roots, tracing the complex lineage that converged to create this singular individual. In a world where identity is often fiercely debated, the DNA offered an objective, mathematical look at his heritage, revealing a rich tapestry of African, European, and Native American genetic markers. While his African ancestry was the foundational element of his genetic identity, reflecting the history of his family and the broader African American experience, the specific mixing of various regional DNA segments painted a picture of deep historical convergence. Scientists noted that his genetic markers showed a high degree of diversity, which is often associated with specific health vulnerabilities, but also with unique physical and creative attributes. This ancestral puzzle underscored the complexity of his identity, showing that his lineage was a reflection of the complicated, painful, and beautiful history of the American melting pot, written directly into his DNA. What made these findings so profoundly shocking to the scientific community was the sheer scale of the disconnect between public perception and biological reality. For decades, the global public felt entitled to ownership over his body, analyzing every wrinkle, every change in color, and every medical crisis with a toxic mix of curiosity and condemnation. He was treated as a specimen of human strangeness, an artificial creation who had removed himself from the normal boundaries of human biology. The DNA destroyed this illusion entirely. It proved that he was, in fact, deeply bound by his biology, suffering from well-documented severe genetic conditions that explained almost every single one of his widely criticized physical anomalies. The scientists realized that the narrative surrounding this cultural icon was built on a foundation of profound ignorance, where a man struggling against multiple debilitating genetic disorders was systematically villainized for the outward symptoms of his internal illnesses. The wider implications of this genetic study extend far beyond the legacy of one individual, serving as a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of superficial judgment in the age of mass media. It reminds us that the human body is an incredibly complex system governed by a hidden code that we cannot see from the outside. When we judge a person's appearance, their physical limitations, or their struggles with health based solely on external observations, we are often looking at the symptoms of a biological battle that we know nothing about. The scientists who analyzed the DNA were shocked not just by the specific mutations they found, but by the realization of how easily an entire global society could misinterpret a clear-cut medical crisis as a series of bizarre personal choices. It forced a moment of collective reflection on how we treat those who suffer under the public gaze, highlighting the need for empathy, medical literacy, and scientific truth over tabloid speculation. In the end, the genetic blueprint of this iconic figure reveals a story not of artificial transformation, but of a profound and exhausting human struggle against biological destiny. It shows a man who was dealt a highly challenging genetic hand, characterized by a visible autoimmune disease, an intense vulnerability to physical pain, and a hidden respiratory deficiency. Yet, despite these significant internal obstacles, he managed to construct a legacy that reshaped global culture entirely. The DNA did not reveal a monster or an enigma. It revealed a human being who was intensely fragile on a microscopic level, yet possessing an extraordinary capacity to endure, create, and inspire. The true revelation of the genetic data is that his greatest achievement was not just the music or the dance, but the fact that he managed to conquer the world while fighting an unrelenting, invisible war within his own cells. This scientific revelation forces us to look back at the footage of his performances with an entirely new perspective, transforming our understanding of his genius. When we watch him effortlessly glide across a stage, commanding the attention of tens of thousands of screaming fans, we are no longer just watching a talented artist at the height of his powers. We are watching a medical miracle. We are watching a body that, according to its strict genetic coding, should have been resting, protecting its fragile lungs from the dust of the arena, and shielding its sensitive, depigmented skin from the intense heat of the spotlights. The energy required to project such absolute confidence and joy while dealing with a nervous system genetically primed for hyperalgesia is almost incomprehensible. It suggests that his artistry was not just a career, but a form of profound escapism, a sacred space where he could temporarily decouple his mind from the painful, failing biological vehicle that housed it. The scientists who calibrated these genetic results found themselves acting as revisionist historians, dismantling the deeply entrenched cultural myths that had been manufactured over a 40-year period. In the halls of medical science, the data was discussed with a sense of quiet reverence as researchers recognized the immense psychological burden of carrying these conditions in total secrecy. To admit to the world that he was losing his pigment, that his lungs were failing, and that his pain was unmanageable, would have been seen by the media of that era as an admission of weakness, a vulnerability that the predatory entertainment industry would have immediately exploited. Therefore, he chose to endure the mockery, allowing the world to believe he was an eccentric, rather than revealing the raw, clinical reality of his daily existence. This choice speaks to an incredible level of internal fortitude, a willingness to protect his artistic legacy at the cost of his own public reputation. Furthermore, the genetic markers associated with his immune system offered insight into the profound levels of stress he endured throughout his life. It is well established in modern psychoneuroimmunology that chronic, severe emotional stress acts as a massive accelerant for autoimmune diseases like vitiligo. The DNA showed that his immune system was already genetically predisposed to hyperreactivity, meaning that the immense pressure of global isolation, legal battles, and constant public scrutiny likely acted as a biological gasoline poured onto an already burning fire. The rapid progression of his skin depigmentation and the worsening of his systemic pain correlated directly with the periods of highest stress in his life. The genetic data effectively linked his environment with his biology, showing how the unique, unnatural experience of unprecedented global fame physically eroded his health, turning his own body into an instrument of torment. The discovery of the alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency markers also shed light on the intense physical preparation that must have gone on behind the scenes, hidden from public view. For an individual with this specific respiratory limitation to maintain the vocal stamina required for hit albums and massive world tours, they would have had to employ extraordinary breathing techniques and undergo intense physical conditioning. It redefines our understanding of his vocal style, the sharp catches of breath, the rhythmic gasps, and the high-pitched exclamations that became his signature musical trademarks. What the world praised as innovative vocal stylings may have partially originated as a brilliant subconscious adaptation to a physical limitation, a way to maintain rhythm and momentum while operating on a restricted oxygen supply. This is the hallmark of true genius, the ability to take a biological deficit and convert it into a globally recognized artistic signature. As the scientific community shared these findings within specialized journals and medical conferences, a broader conversation began to emerge regarding the ethics of celebrity journalism and public consumption of health crises. The case became a primary example of how society completely fails to recognize the boundary between public entertainment and private medical suffering. The genetic data served as an indictment of a culture that demands absolute perfection from its icons while simultaneously denying them the basic human right to be ill. The realization that a person was systematically destroyed by a combination of genetic misfortune and public cruelty sent a sobering wave through those who analyzed the data, serving as a permanent reminder that beneath the glittering costumes and the global fame, the laws of human biology remain absolute and unforgiving. The ancestral component of the genetic analysis also opened up fascinating discussions about the concept of global identity. His genetic makeup was a complex map of human migration and history, carrying segments of DNA that connected him to multiple continents and disparate cultures. This genetic diversity is highly symbolic for an artist whose primary cultural achievement was the breaking down of racial barriers in the music industry. He was the first black artist to achieve consistent, massive rotation on mainstream television networks, uniting audiences across every continent, language, and demographic. The DNA revealed that this universal appeal was mirrored internally. His very biological makeup was a bridge between different worlds. This connection between his genetic diversity and his historical role as a global unifier suggests that his life was, in every sense, a profound manifestation of shared human heritage. The shock experienced by the scientists was also driven by the advanced technology used to unlock these secrets, technology that did not exist during the peak of his lifetime. During the 80s and 90s, genetic mapping was in its infancy, unable to provide the detailed, comprehensive health profiles that are possible today. He lived his life in a time when medical science could diagnose his symptoms, but could not fully explain the deeper genetic mechanisms driving them. He was forced to navigate his deteriorating health in a dark age of genomic understanding, relying on treatments that were often experimental or poorly understood by the general medical community. If he were alive today, the current field of personalized medicine could have offered him targeted therapies for his autoimmune disorders, precise pain management protocols tailored to his specific liver enzymes, and protective measures for his respiratory system, potentially altering the trajectory of his life. This realization adds a profound element of chronological tragedy to his story. He was a man ahead of his time artistically, technologically, and culturally, yet he was trapped in a biological era that lacked the tools to properly understand and treat his specific genetic challenges. The genetic report stands as a monument to what might have been a clinical glimpse into a parallel reality where science could have saved an icon from his own DNA. It highlights the immense importance of current genetic research, demonstrating how understanding our personal code can mean the difference between a life of prolonged suffering and one of managed health, emphasizing that even the most wealthy and powerful individuals are entirely at the mercy of contemporary medical limitations. The data also forced a complete reevaluation of his final months, particularly the preparation for his highly anticipated comeback tour, which was set to consist of 50 sold-out shows in London. The public and the concert promoters expected a middle-aged man to recreate the athletic feats of his 20s, putting immense pressure on a body that the genetic data shows was already structurally compromised. The sheer impossibility of demanding 50 high-energy performances from a person possessing severe respiratory vulnerabilities and a pain processing system in total crisis becomes glaringly obvious through the lens of science. The genetic evidence suggests that the comeback attempt was a biological impossibility, an endeavor that pushed an already fragile, genetically exhausted system far past its breaking point, making the tragic outcome of that summer not a sudden surprise, but the predictable conclusion of a long-standing medical crisis. Ultimately, the scientific analysis of this genetic map provides a profound sense of closure for those who sought the truth behind the endless rumors and mysteries. It strips away the sensationalism, the hyperbole, and the malicious gossip, replacing them with the cool, clean clarity of empirical facts. The data allows us to view this historic figure with a level of objectivity and compassion that was completely denied to him during his 50 years on this earth. We are left with a portrait of an individual who carried an immense physical burden in silence, choosing to focus his remaining energy on delivering art that would bring joy to a world that was consistently unkind to him. The genetic code confirms that his existence was a profound anomaly, a beautiful and complex intersection of extraordinary talent and extraordinary suffering. As the details of this genetic profile continue to be studied by researchers looking into autoimmune disorders and pain management, the legacy of this iconic figure undergoes a permanent transformation. He is no longer just the king of pop, a distant mythical figure who existed in a realm of pure fantasy. He is restored to his rightful place as a human being, bound by the same biological vulnerabilities as the rest of us, yet distinct in his ability to transcend them. The shock that scientists felt upon looking at his DNA was the shock of recognizing the sheer scale of human endurance. It is the realization that the greatest show on Earth was not the elaborate staging, the lights, or the special effects, but the quiet, daily victory of an individual who refused to let his genetic limitations define what he could offer to the world. This perspective challenges every fan, every critic, and every student of history to rethink the way they engage with the lives of public figures. It demands that we look past the surface level of performance and appearance, recognizing that everyone we encounter is navigating an internal reality dictated by a biological blueprint we cannot see. The story written in this specific DNA profile is a timeless reminder of the complexity of the human condition, a narrative of triumph and tragedy that coexisted within a single fragile frame. By understanding the biological truths that governed his life, we can finally move past the decades of manufactured mystery and appreciate the true nature of his journey. A path marked by deep, unseen struggles, but illuminated by an unmatched, enduring brilliance that no genetic deficit could ever dim. The profound lessons found within this genetic analysis continue to ripple out into various fields of study, offering a case study in how public perception can completely lose touch with reality. In academic settings, this genetic profile is used to demonstrate how easily cultural biases can warp our understanding of objective physical symptoms. When an individual is placed under a global spotlight, their body ceases to be seen as a biological entity and instead becomes a canvas for public projection. The scientists who uncovered these facts felt a deep responsibility to ensure that the data spoke clearly, acting as a corrective measure against the decades of misinformation. This analysis shows that the most accurate way to understand the mysteries of human behavior is often to look at the hidden, microscopic foundations that quiet dictate our daily lives. The realization that his skin condition was an aggressive form of vitiligo also helps to destigmatize the illness for millions of people worldwide who suffer from the same disorder. For generations, individuals with vitiligo faced isolation and confusion, often lacking a prominent figure who openly represented their struggle. Although he was forced to manage the condition under a cloud of public suspicion, the modern scientific confirmation of his diagnosis serves as a powerful validation for the vitiligo community. It shows that the disease strikes indiscriminately, affecting even the most celebrated individuals, and that the physical changes it causes are completely beyond the control of the patient. This scientific clarity transforms his private medical battle into a source of public awareness and education, helping to foster a more compassionate understanding of autoimmune conditions. In the realm of pain research, the genetic findings regarding his heightened sensitivity to discomfort provide crucial data for understanding the complex nature of managing long-term physical suffering. It highlights the absolute necessity of personalized medicine, showing that a standard approach to pain relief can be completely ineffective or highly dangerous depending on an individual's genetic variations. The scientists noted that his case should serve as a warning to the medical community about the risks of treating chronic pain without understanding a patient's specific metabolic profile. By analyzing how his body interacted with medication, current researchers can better identify individuals who are at high risk for dependency and develop safer, more effective strategies for managing severe pain, ensuring that his suffering contributes to the advancement of medical safety for future generations. The respiratory findings also offer a profound testament to the adaptability of the human body, showing how other physical systems can compensate for a hidden deficiency. To achieve the level of athletic performance that he demonstrated throughout his decades-long career, while carrying a genetic marker for lung tissue's vulnerability, implies an extraordinary level of cardiovascular efficiency and muscular endurance. His body had to optimize every other available resource to make up for the respiratory deficit, a process that requires years of intense, dedicated training. This biological adaptation shows that the human frame is capable of incredible adjustments when pushed by a dominant will, demonstrating that our genetic code is not always a hard limit, but a set of conditions that can be negotiated and overcome through extraordinary effort. When we consider the totality of the genetic evidence, the image that emerges is one of profound isolation. He was an individual who existed in a state of double alienation, separated from the general public by his unprecedented fame, and separated from a normal physical experience by his unique combination of genetic disorders. He could not explain his suffering to a public that was eager to misinterpret it. nor could he find easy relief within the medical framework of his time. This sense of isolation makes his creative output even more astonishing, as it reveals that his music and art were produced by a person who was constantly navigating a deep, multifaceted loneliness. The DNA allows us to see the immense emotional and physical cost of his legacy, adding a layer of deep reverence to the art he left behind. The scientific community's astonishment also stems from the realization of how much energy he dedicated to philanthropy and humanitarian causes while dealing with these severe health crises. Throughout his life, he donated hundreds of millions of dollars to hospitals, children's charities, and disaster relief efforts, frequently visiting sick children in medical centers around the world. The genetic data reveals that when he visited these hospitals, he was not just a wealthy patron offering charity, he was a fellow patient, someone who deeply understood the reality of chronic pain and medical isolation from his own daily experience. This shared understanding changes our view of his humanitarian work, showing that his empathy for the suffering of others was rooted in the profound, quiet reality of his own biological challenges. The legacy of this genetic study remains an active topic of discussion as technology continues to evolve, pointing toward a future where such misunderstandings can be prevented through early scientific intervention. It emphasizes the power of genomic sequencing to provide answers where gossip fails, offering a model for how we should evaluate the physical struggles of historical figures. The scientists who participated in this analysis helped to restore a sense of dignity to a life that was systematically stripped of it by the media marketplace, proving that the truth will always find a way to surface, even if it must wait for technology to catch up with the mystery. The genetic map stands as the final, definitive biography of a global icon, written in the indelible language of science, confirming that his true strength was found in his ability to shine brightly despite the heavy shadows written into his very cells. This ultimate clarity allows the world to finally lay the rumors to rest and view his memory through a lens of profound respect and understanding. The sensationalized stories that filled the tabloids for generations disappear when confronted with the cold, undeniable evidence of his chromosomes. We are left with the image of an extraordinary human being who met the challenges of a difficult biological destiny with unprecedented creativity and grace. The shock of what his DNA revealed is ultimately a positive transformation, replacing a narrative of confusion and judgment with a story of absolute resilience, ensuring that history will remember him not as an enigma, a physical strangeness, but as a triumph of the human spirit over biological adversity.